Let me ask you this question. Why do people forget God when they are on the top and at the best moments of their lives? Now, that's sad. It's because you feel very good about being there on that moment. Unlike right nowadays, some of the athletes would honor God for bringing them on the top. But while they are there, do they remember the Lord? I hope they do, especially when they want to achieve more success. And that's the same too also for us believers. We should never forget God, especially that when He has given us His blessings. Some, when the Lord provides a huge blessing to them financial, they forgot actually to honor the Lord with their gifts and offerings. So that's the sad thing. I hope that we will not do that thing. The title of our message for today is Put God First in Your Life. We will continue with our series in Second Samuel, chapters 5, the last part of it, and chapter 6, the whole chapter. This is the moment when David finally was able to bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, his city. So if we will summarize what lesson we can learn from tonight's message is when Israel rejected God as king and asked Shmuel for human ruler, and that's is 1 Samuel chapter 8 verse 6, David brought back the rule of the Lord in the kingdom when God settled him in Jerusalem. Because David wanted the people to know that God was still the ruler and he was just an instrument of his rulership. So this evening, we will be learning about 4 lessons in putting God first in your life. Are we ready? So the first lesson is seek the Lord in making decisions. So we discussed the last part of chapter 5. The Philistines tried to capture David when they learned that he became the king of Israel. Remember, they considered David as a defector from Israel to them, but he had been proclaimed as king of Israel. David inquired of the Lord on what to do, and then he became victorious. If you will remember from the moment when he had a tough moment, he needed to inquire of the Lord, and he would always win. But whenever he made decisions without inquiring of the Lord, he would fail. So I hope from this lesson, we'll remember that we should always inquire of the Lord, especially in making major decisions in life. Now, this was a major thing is because fighting the Philistines or making peace with them was a big matter for their kingdom, right? So let's read verses 7 and 10 and 18. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went down to the strongholds. So what's going on here? The Philistines felt betrayed that David had become the leader of their rival state. So they thought that David would not become the ruler of Israel anymore, even after the death of Shaul. So going in full force, they were very serious in capturing David and perhaps executing him. They wanted to understand why David was doing this to them. They thought that David was not an Israeli anymore. Even though David had the whole kingdom to protect him, he had to secure himself, as this could be the biggest war that he would face against the Philistines. So that's what verse 18 says. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. Rephaim is very near at the south of Jerusalem. So the fact that they were able to get that close to Jerusalem, the Philistines may have breached the security that David has placed maybe somewhere around the region. They came very close to Jerusalem when they arrived in Rephaim. So if we look at the map here, can you see there the valley of Rephaim? How near it is to Bethlehem, the hometown of David, and how near that is to Jerusalem. They are very close to coming near the city of David. So that was a tense moment for them. Verse 19, so David inquired of the Yahweh, shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands? So whether David was fearful or courageous, he did the right thing here. He inquired of the Lord, even though he can simply call all his armies and defend the city. He always needed to inquire of the Lord, and he learned that lesson. David asked if he should fight instead of negotiate. Remember, he had peace with the Philistines, and he could have done that. And come to think of it, it would be beneficial for both of them that he would make peace with the Philistines because he once campaigned for them. You remember that story in 1 Samuel. But what did David do? Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands? The Yahweh answered, go, I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands. So the Lord gave him a go signal. Remember this, when you know the will of the Lord, it's refreshing to receive an answer from him. When the Lord gives you the go signal, we will always win and never fail. But look at this. Even though God gave him the go signal, David had to go and fight. That means in order to achieve victory, he had to fight. So in fulfilling the will of God, it will be very tough. Don't expect that things will be smooth when you're doing the will of God. In fact, the enemy will try his best to stop you from fulfilling the work of God. He wants to frustrate you. So even though you as a student, you prayed and you studied so well and long, and still you struggle during the examination or the recitation, it's because the enemy wants you to fail, especially when you have prepared so much for it. Don't despair. God assures you that when you do what you should be doing, when you follow his lead, you will achieve victory and success. Do you believe that? Huh? Verse 20, David went to Baal Perazim, and there he defeated them and said, as waters break out, the Yahweh has broken out against my enemies before me. It was a huge victory. It's like a gushing power, a very convincing victory. So that place was called Baal Perazim. So David did not wait for the Philistines to arrive in Jerusalem. They were there in Rephaim. He faced them in that place. He didn't have to defend the city and wait to be defensive. He faced them where they were positioned in the valley of Rephaim. That's part of the territory of Yehudah. So David won, and he credited his victory to the Lord. That's very important for Israel to understand. Remember, this convincing victory was only possible because of the power of the Lord. And that's manifested there in the saying that David had here. As waters break out, that means it's a gushing, powerful rush of water. All of a sudden, the enemy were defeated. They didn't know what hit them. Whenever you experience victory, always give credit to the Lord. David named that place according to how he won the battle. David used the title Baal, which was a Canaanite language, to let them know, everybody know, not just the people of Israel, that it was the God of Israel who won the battle. Okay, Baal Perazim. Perez means a sudden burst. Okay. So the Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. So what's going on here? The Philistines could not carry the idols as they failed to help them win the battle. Remember in 1 Samuel chapter 7, they fought against the Philistines and they were losing. So they decided to bring the Ark of the Covenant with them in battle. But instead of winning, the Philistines was able to capture the Ark of the Covenant, thinking that just putting the Ark of the Covenant before them, the victory was automatic. But that's not what they experienced. They lost the Ark of the Covenant until God defended himself, his Ark, and he punished the Philistines. And the Philistines were forced to bring back the Ark of the Covenant to the Israelis. So in this case, they couldn't do anything. The idols were helpless. So they abandoned their idols and they had to run for their lives because it was a sudden, rushing power of God through the army of David, of course. They were caught unaware. They had to quickly retreat from the battle. That was a very shameful defeat for the Philistines. So David picked up the idols to prove that they have won. They had to show it to the people. See, we got their gods. And what would David do with their gods? Of course, he would destroy them to further shame them, not to own them. And that's what sometimes other nations do. Whenever they capture their idols, they would make use of them, if not destroy them. But of course, we know here, even though it's not said there, David wanted to destroy their idols. So the idols of the Philistines were impotent against the God of Israel. Do you believe that there is no idol, no God greater than our God? Amen. Amen. Verse 22, once more the Philistines came up and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So they're there for a retaliation. They were very embarrassed at this loss because it's like they were caught unaware. Like a gushing water. They like, have you seen in the provinces, some people would take a bath in the river, diba? But then all of a sudden it rained and yung water from the mountain would rush to the river, right? And you have to escape because it's going to be violent. Something like that. The army of David came upon them and they were caught defenseless. Verse 23, so David inquired of the Lord and he answered, see this, David was very careful to ask the real leader God for guidance. So even though David had a convincing victory against the Philistines, he still submitted to the counsel and approval of the true leader of the kingdom, and that is God. That is God. So what did the Lord say? Do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the poplar trees. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Yahweh has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. So the Lord gave David another strategy, a different one from the first time that they met, to frustrate the plans and the retaliation of the Philistines. Because of course the Philistines know they had to regroup and they had to think of a different plan. So to frustrate them, God gave them a different plan. But the Lord promised to give them the signal, David and his army. As you see there in verse 24, the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees. Now, this was probably caused by a strong wind. What you can see here, God was acting on nature. The signal was the strong sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees. So when that happens, that would be the signal from the Lord that they can attack the Philistines. They needed someone, of course God, who knew what the Philistines were doing. And so God was watching over them and was giving them the signal when to attack. The Yahweh has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. That's what the last part of verse 24 says. That was a very clear message to David. There's nothing else to wait for except for that sign from the Lord. It's a very blessed thing to get such a specific instruction so that you don't have to guess how the Lord will move. Sometimes God will do that. He's very specific on how he's going to move, on how he's going to help them out win the battle. So let's take a look at the battle again. What happened? Verse 25. So David did as the Yahweh commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. So remember, Gibeon was the city of Shaul, part of Benjamin. The Philistines went north. They were forced to get to the territory of the Benjamites. But then, of course, they're not secure there. So they had to go to west to Gezer. Okay? So the Israeli army pushed the Philistines back to Gezer. And the people of Gezer was probably surprised at what is going on here. Why has the battle come to us? We thought that the battle would be in Jerusalem. So why are the Philistines retreating here? Now we are in trouble. We're involved in this battle that we're not supposed to be a part of. Considering that the Philistines went all out against David. So how come they were retreating? David clearly showed Israel that the Lord gave them the victory with, remember this, he inquired of the Lord, with the counsel of the Lord, with the approval of the Lord, go and attack, and with the leadership of the Lord, wait for my signal, and when you get the signal, you attack them during the battle against the Philistines. Remember that. The counsel of the Lord, the approval of the Lord, and the leadership of the Lord. That is very important to gain victory. All right? So, what can we learn from this lesson? When we seek the Lord for His will, especially in making major decisions in life, we will never go wrong, even if it would be very difficult to fulfill. He may tell us to face a very difficult challenge as we try to fulfill that, but He will guarantee success and He will always be with us. Do you believe that? Letter B, treat the Lord as holy. So David was done fighting with the Philistines. Now he can focus on bringing the Ark of the Covenant from Kiriath Yearim to the city of David in Jerusalem. With the enemies defeated and Jerusalem built and secured, David tasked to bring the Ark of the Lord into the city to show that the God of the armies rules in Israel. I need to emphasize that later, God of the armies again. We mentioned this last week, but David wanted for everyone to know this specific compound name of God as uniquely how God has been to him as the God of the armies or the Lord of hosts Sabaoth. Okay? Verse 1 of chapter 6, David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. Now that's a lot. You just needed to get one box, a holy furniture, and he wanted to bring 30,000 people. Whoa, what's going on here? He and all his men went to Baale in Yehuda to bring up from there the Ark of Elohim, which is called by the name of the Yahweh Sabaoth, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. So why did David bring so many people? Because he wanted to assure that the ark of the Lord would be taken and transported to Baale, especially that he wanted this to be a festive transportation of the ark going to Jerusalem. You remember, Jerusalem is on top of the hill. So David brought as much manpower as he could. Baaleb was probably the same place as Kiriath Yearim, where the ark was last mentioned, and it was kept at the house of Avinadab after the Philistines sent the Ark of the Covenant back to the Israelis. If you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 7 verse 2, the ark remained at Kiriath Yearim a long time, 20 years in all. So this was during the time of Shaul. And remember, David has just begun to reign from Jerusalem when this was happening. Then all the people of Israel turned back to Yahweh. So let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 6. Note how David calls the ark. First, it's the ark of Elohim. We know the word Elohim, it means God. Okay, specifically the one true God. But he gave it a new name, the name of Yahweh Tsevaot. Again, this is a unique compound name because we have the name of God, Yahweh, and then he put another noun, so compound name, Tsevaot, or the Lord of hosts, okay, or the hosts, of course, Yahweh of the hosts. It talks about the armies in the heavenly realms. So the arrival of the ark at Jerusalem means that the holy presence of the Lord was there too. So it was very important for David that the religious service would be transferred from Shiloh to Kiriath Yearim to Jerusalem. If you remember, Jerusalem is noted to be the place where Abraham sacrificed, well, it didn't push through, Yitzhak. God provided another sacrifice. So let's look at the map. When they conquered the land, they put the Ark of the Covenant and, of course, the other furnitures and the tent, the tabernacle in Shiloh. This is part of Ephraim. And then it was captured during a battle against the Philistines, but they returned it to Kiriath Yearim. Actually, the people of Kiriath Yearim picked it up when they saw that it was being transported in a cart driven by 2 cows. Kiriath Yearim is part of Yehuda. So that was a long travel, but from Kiriath Yearim, it's closer to Jerusalem. Okay? I'd like to quote 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 3 about Shiloh. The lamp of God had not yet gone out at that time, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark was. So as Samuel was growing up, the ark was just there as he was being raised in Shiloh. But in chapter 7, when the ark was captured and returned, the ark remained at Kiriath Yearim a long time, 20 years in all. Then all the people of Israel turned back to Yahweh. So that means when they got the ark back, that's when they remembered the Lord and they returned to him. Let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 3. They set the ark of Elohim on a new cart because, remember, the Philistines returned the ark of the covenant on an cart driven by 2 cows and brought it from the house of Avinadab, which was on a hill. So remember, climbing up a hill is not safe. But they used a cart to transport it. Utsa and Achio, son of Avinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of Elohim on it. And Achio was walking in front of it. So he could not actually see it because he was in front. Okay. So Avinadab might have been a Levite. That's why they were the ones who took care of the Ark of the Covenant for 20 years in their house in Kiriath Yearim. Now, Utsa could be Eleazar because in chapter 7 of 1 Samuel, it says there that Eleazar was consecrated to keep watch and to take care of the Ark of the Covenant. They should have known that the Ark should be transported, carried by 4 priests because the poles of the Ark of the Covenant should never be removed from there. So why do you need 4? 2 in front and 2 at the back, right and left side. They should have known that. They should transport it not using a cart, but priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant. So they violated the instruction of the Lord. Let me quote first the instruction from Exodus chapter 25, verse 12. Cast 4 gold rings for it, the Ark of the Covenant, and fasten them to its 4 feet with 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other side. Then make 2 poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold because it's going to be a special furniture. Insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry it. The poles are to remain in the rings of this ark. They are not to be removed. So even looking at the Ark of the Covenant, they knew that they should be carried by people rather than being put on a cart. The poles will tell them. The priests and the Levites should be aware of this instruction, but they failed to follow that. So therefore, what could go wrong went wrong. Right? When you're handling the ark with your hands, you could care for it better. But when it's on a cart, when the cart stumbles, the ark could fall. And that's what almost happened. Did they seek for a priest to be able to transport this properly? We don't know, but obviously they were not able to get priests to carry the ark. Instead, they just changed the cart that the Philistines used to transport the ark to them. So how long was the journey from Kiriath Yearim coming up to Jerusalem? That's about 15 kilometers. So maybe perhaps they thought that, well, since it's that long, maybe it's better to transport the ark on a cart so that it's not going to be tiresome for all of us. But that is, again, a violation of the covenant of the Lord. They could have just get more priests. When some of the priests were tired, some priests would take shifts in carrying the ark. Verse 5, David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Yahweh, with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. So everything was going well for David. The ark is the center of attention, and he was celebrating the procession toward Jerusalem. David was simply happy to take the ark to the city. But did they reach there? Let's find out. Let's look at verse 6. When they came to the threshing floor of Nachon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of Elohim because the oxen stumbled. So it was still being driven by animals. Previously, cows from the Philistines to Kiriath Yearim. Now they're using oxen. Now, we're not sure where Nachon was. Definitely it's somewhere in between Kiriath Yearim and Jerusalem. But see, they came to a threshing floor. And you see, when you have a threshing floor, it's usually clear, clean, and flat. It's because that's where the animals would trample on the wheat in order to remove the husks, right? What was the reason for the oxen to stumble? We don't know. But you don't expect an oxen to stumble on a flat surface. Uzzah might have all the good intention in saving the Ark of the Covenant by touching it and preventing it from falling and eventually from breaking. But it was his fault at first, and his brothers, that they transported it using a cart instead of carrying it from the poles that were attached to it. So they have ought to do their job properly from the very beginning. So verse 7, the Yahweh's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. That was God's judgment. Therefore, Elohim struck him down and he died beside the ark of Elohim. You can see there Yahweh getting angry and Elohim striking him down. So that means Yahweh and Elohim are just the same person, same God. Okay? Yahweh is Elohim, Elohim is Yahweh. Though Uzzah paid with his life for saving the ark, he and his brother actually set it up for danger. That's the problem. They set it up for danger by not carrying the ark. Uzzah did not treat the Lord holy by disregarding the instruction of the Lord. No one ought to touch it. And no one ought to transport it that manner. Okay? So it was their fault at the beginning pa lang. For the Lord, Uzzah was not a hero. And if in case the ark fell and breaks, now the Lord is going to be punishing them, and perhaps they would make a new one with the instruction from Exodus. But it was their fault for not following instructions from the very beginning. Yahweh has been patient with Uzzah and Achio from the moment that they took the ark from their house until they reached Nachor. And trouble came at Nachor, at the threshing floor of all places. He'd been patient with these two men until what could go wrong actually went wrong. Have you heard of that rule? Okay, Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law. What could go wrong will go wrong. All right? Look at an example in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 3. Moshe then said to Aharon, after the Lord killed the two sons of Aharon for offering strange fire. This is what the Yahweh spoke of when he said, among those who approach me, talking about the priests, I will be proved holy. In the sight of all people, I will be honored. Those two sons of Aharon disregarded the holiness of the Lord, and so God punished them and killed them in front of all the people. The Lord judged those priests, and these two men, Uzzah and Achio, disregarded and forgot about that God could do this to them. The Lord did judge Uzzah and Achio as he judged Nadab and Abihu, the two sons of Aharon, for violating the laws of the Lord. And so he executed those two priests as well as he executed Uzzah. God is respecter of no persons. Remember that. Verse 8, then David was angry because the Yahweh's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, that place is called Peretz Uzzah. Remember a while ago, David defeated the Philistines, diba? Baal Peretzim. The Lord used the same word, Perez or Baal Peretzim before in chapter 5 verse 20. Now it's Peretz Uzzah. It's like a sudden burst of anger of the Lord against Uzzah for violating his instructions. Now, come to think of it. Was David angry at the Lord that he judged Uzzah? Or was David angry at the whole situation that it ended up with the death of someone, Uzzah? Or was he angry at himself? We could speculate, but I think David was angry because everything just went wrong. Whether he blamed Utsa and Achio for this, and he's partially to blame because he should also have known how to transport this ark, and he thought that he would be able to transport it the wrong way. Basically, this was the negligence of Utsa and Achio, which led to the falling over of the ark. Well, almost. The death of Utsa ruined the celebratory mood of everyone, especially of David. I'm not sure if he was blaming God. I don't think David was blaming God. But you may have that perspective. It depends on how you read the text because it's not really clear on whom David was angry. But he was afraid, verse 9. That's why I don't think he was angry at God. He was angry at what happened in general. Okay. David was afraid of the Yahweh that day and said, how can the ark of the Yahweh ever come to me? He was supposed to bring it to Jerusalem. And of course, because of this incident, he could not continue with the transportation of the ark to Jerusalem. You see, David wanted everybody to learn from that experience, and that's why they named it Perez Utsa. David knew that this cannot continue. Verse 10, he was not willing to take the ark of the Yahweh to be with him in the city of David because God was angry. God was angry. It's like there is a big moment, all of a sudden you had to cut the program. Will the service continue? Diba? Parang awkward. And that's why David was angry. We cannot bring the Ark of the Covenant. I cannot afford to bring the Ark of the Covenant to my city because God is angry. And God may bring his judgment upon our city as well. David thought that the transportation of the ark must be inappropriate and therefore must be suspended. Now, he didn't know what to do. All right? So verse 10 explains to us, he was not willing to take the ark of the Yahweh to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. Now, this is very interesting. Even after seeing the tragedy of Utsa, Obed-Edom accepted to keep and care for the ark temporarily. Now, if you were Obed-Edom, you might think, no, oh, not here, not here. I don't want the anger of the Lord to also burst to us. You don't want to accommodate someone who's very angry. You would stay away, right? But he accepted. He accepted. Now, this is the more interesting part. Obed-Edom is not a Hebrew name. He was a Gitti. Who is a Gitti? A Gitti is someone from Gath. So Obed-Edom was actually a Philistine, but under the rule of the Israelis. So he's probably a convert, a proselyte. His loyalty is not with the people of Gath anymore. His loyalty is now with the people of Israel. The ark had to be kept in the care of a proselyte, a native of Gath, of the Philistines. Diba? So, what can we learn from this part of the story? Even though Utsa and Achio cared for the ark for several years, 20 years before David took it and intended to bring it to Jerusalem, the Lord did not allow Utsa to disrespect his holiness in front of all the people. He judged him even that if that frustrated David. Okay? So, remember, brothers and sisters, treat the Lord as holy. Do not undermine him. Do not underestimate him. Do not approach his throne of grace without showing him the due respect that is him. Do not make any demands of him. Remember, he is God, he's in heaven, and you are on earth. Let your words be few, as Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Third lesson, welcome the Lord to your home. That's what Obed-Edom did, and eventually David. The Lord blessed the household of a Philistine who welcomed and cared for the ark, while David waited for the wrath of God to subside after the death of Utsa. So let's continue reading the story, verse 11. The ark of the Yahweh remained in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gitti, for 3 months. And the Yahweh blessed him and his entire household. Wow, what a good news. That means God was not angry anymore. Now, think of this. Can a household change completely within 3 months? Can a person's life completely change when he accepts the Lord as his personal Lord and Savior? I think he can. Just like in this case, for 3 months that the ark was in the house of Obed-Edom, that would be the greatest moment of the life of this family. The Lord blessed them. And in fact, if we were in the place of Obed-Edom, we would wish that the Lord would also stay in your own house. Obed-Edom was very privileged to have the Ark of the Covenant stay in his home, at least for 3 months. For 3 months. And perhaps it became the envy of the other people because they're seeing Obed-Edom, the Gitti, the guy who came from Gath, richly blessed by the Lord. So the Lord blesses those who welcome him into his house. Is the Lord welcome into your house? Is the Lord being worshipped into your house? Is the Lord being honored and respected in your house? Is the Lord ruling in your house? Are you aware that the Lord is in your house? That time, the physical presence of the ark reminded them God was there. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Even if you don't see a physical manifestation or representation of God, will you consider your house a holy house because the holy God is in your house? Diba? So the people of Oved Edom were probably changed because of the presence of the Lord among them. If you want to be changed, welcome Jesus into your house, into your heart. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, you and your household will be saved. We tend to behave well when we are conscious of the presence of God among us and within us. So let's keep that consciousness that Jesus is ruling in our house here and in the houses of our members in eLife. When we welcome the Lord, his power and presence will change us. Miracles happen. The word of the Lord will come to you. You will receive guidance. You will receive comfort when you mourn. You will receive power when you are weak. You will receive guidance when you are confused, when you need wisdom. His holiness is transforming. So if you're not living a holy life, let the Lord come into your life and you will be transformed into his holiness. It is an honor to have the Lord staying in your home. Amen? Verse 12, now King David was told, the Yahweh has blessed the house of Oved Edom and everything he has because of the ark of Elohim. So David went to bring up the ark of Elohim from the house of Oved Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. Now, so David saw that the Lord has blessed Oved Edom, and of course that could have been him, and so he felt envious. I mean, natural. That's natural, and that's good actually. So he knew at that time that God's anger had subsided. Now he can come before the Lord and he would not be angry at him. So he could transport the Ark of the Covenant from Oved Edom to Jerusalem, his city, and he could celebrate again. He could resume this celebration. David was looking forward for the Lord to bless his city, not just his own household, much more than what God did to the house of Oved Edom. Do you believe that God's blessing is proportionate to your size? Diba? David decided to welcome the Lord into his city. So he rushed up to get the Ark of the Covenant from Oved Edom and thank the guy for keeping it well. Verse 13, when those who were carrying the Ark of the Yahweh had taken 6 steps. So right now they're doing the right thing. They did not use a cart. They were carrying the Ark of the Covenant as instructed by the Lord in Exodus, which we read a while ago. He sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. So what is going on here? So as they were now careful in transporting the ark to Jerusalem the proper way, David was still concerned. Okay, maybe the Lord was blessing Oved Edom, but is he still angry with us for not doing it the right way before? So what did he do? With 6 steps from where they were picking up the ark, he sacrificed the bull and a fattened calf. So that means he wanted to please God with offerings, a peace offering, okay, or a sin offering. He did not want to disappoint the Lord. He commanded to offer sacrifices to God to appease him in case he was still angry with him, with the incident with Uzzah. Since no sacrifice was made when Uzzah died. So that was the time to offer sacrifices for their sin at that time, 3 months prior. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Yahweh with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Yahweh with shouts and sounds of triumph. This could have happened 3 months before. Now it proceeded. Finally, though David was neither a priest nor a Levite, he wore a linen ephod so he could lead the worship for the Lord. And he gave all he had. Now, was it legal for him to do that? I'll explain in just a while. Verse 15 says, the people also rejoiced at the arrival of the presence of the ark of the Lord in Jerusalem. So at last, after 3 months, bitin sila for that. After 3 months of delay, David could continue bringing the ark of the Lord to the city with festivity. Verse 16, as the ark of the Yahweh was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Shaul, watched from a window. And when she saw David leaping and dancing before the Yahweh, she despised him in her heart. What's going on here? Now, that's bad news. Everything was going well for David. Now, the author revealed to us Michal's attitude toward David. It was a heart issue. It says there, she despised him in her heart. Now, how did the author knew that she had that in her heart? Maybe God revealed. No? Anyway, God sees the heart. Eventually, it would reveal in the next few verses when Michal confronts David because of this. She was offended by David leaping and dancing with just wearing a linen ephod. Okay. It was not only that she misunderstood David. She did not like the way David was acting toward the Lord. And we'll understand more of this in verse 20. Maybe she was not actively participating in the celebration. She was not into this stuff. That's why she was just in the window. She didn't even wait down to join the other people's in celebration. Maybe she felt comfortable. I'm in the royal palace. I should be staying here. Let the people do those stuff. Maybe she was not interested as much as David was interested with really leading the celebration right there. Her focus was on David, while David's focus was on God. She did not understand the joy David had. Remember, David was frustrated because this could have been done 3 months before. But because of the Uzzah tragedy, David was overjoyed that finally the ark could be brought to his city. Verse 17, they brought the ark of the Yahweh and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Yahweh. So David provided an appropriate place to keep the ark of the Lord, safe, secured, and separate from the people. It must be in a holy place, okay, that only the priest had access. The proper way to receive the Lord was to honor him through the prescribed setup, that's the tent that he made, and sacrifices due him. That reminded me of the parable of the wedding feast that Jesus gave. He said, invite all the people out there, but make sure they're wearing wedding garments. One disregarded that requirement, and the Lord threw him out. When we come before the Lord's presence, make sure we're following his instructions on how to approach him. Verse 18, after he had finished sacrificing burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of Yahweh Tsebaoth. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of Israelis, both men and women. And all the people went to their homes. Wow. So, since the Lord did not do anything to show his disapproval to David, what he did, that must be a sign for David that he's doing the right thing, that he's been accepted, that God approves the celebration, everything that David prepared for him. The fact that the ark rested inside the tent, everything was well. With the ark now placed already in the tent, David, as king, acted as God's instrument to bless the people of Israel. That's why he gave them bread. He blessed them. He said in verse 18, he blessed the people. He is God's agent, instrument. He blessed the people in the name of Yahweh Tsebaoth. Again, David wanted the people to remember Yahweh as Sabaoth. He wanted this to be a unique compound name of God in his relation to his work, through his life and leadership. The food that David gave away was the sign of the fellowship of God with the people of Israel. Now, a while ago, we were saying, why did David wearing a linen ephod? Okay, actually, that's his inner garment. Michal was displeased that he was only wearing that because probably David removed his outer robe, the robe of a king. Right? Maybe that's the sign of David telling them that even though he was the leader of the nation, but before God, he's a worshiper. He removed his royal stature in order to worship God. And he became one with the people in humility to worship God. Now, of course, just wearing a linen ephod, his body could almost be seen by everybody. But David didn't care about it. What he cared for is his function, just like the previous priest king of Jerusalem. 900 years before this event, the city of Jerusalem had a king priest. He functioned as a priest, he functioned as a king. His name was Melchizedek. And you remember, Abraham offered sacrifices to the God Most High, and his priest was Melchizedek on the same spot in Jerusalem. So David right now was a king priest. All right. In fact, in 2 Samuel chapter 8, we're studying chapter 6, verse 18. In chapter 8, verse 18, it says there that the sons of David were priests. So these are honorary priests. Okay. David acted like Melchizedek was about 9 centuries ago, was the king priest of Jerusalem. So what can we learn from this part of the story? Welcome the Lord to your home. The Lord accepted the sacrifice of David and gave him the chance to bring the Ark of the Covenant into the tent that he prepared. The Lord will gladly come to our house when we let him. So he prepared a tent. In the time of Abraham, he prepared altars before the Lord. So welcome the Lord with an intent to give him a special place in your house. Now, you remember when Jesus was transfigured, what did Peter, James, and John said? Lord, it is good for us that we're here. Let us prepare a tent for you, for Moshe, and for Eliyahu. So it's something the same here in this situation. Last point, worship the Lord with all you are. Only a few verses here. David justified himself before Michal why he worshiped the Lord in that manner. When David returned home to bless his household, he was very happy. He blessed Israel. Now it's his turn to bless his own household. Michal, daughter of Shaul, came out to meet him and said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants as any vulgar fellow would. Wow. Imagine that. David was in high spirits. He's been in the presence of the Lord. He's happy that the Lord accepted him and he was able to serve his people by blessing them with giving them food. David was excited to bring the same blessing to his own home. So it must be very disappointing for him to be met by an angry wife whom he fought for and he redeemed from Paltiel. Why is this wife of mine behaving such a way to me? Now, Michal's issue was David's dressing because he thought that David was being malicious, but in fact, she had a malicious thought of David. Remember, David had many wives and he had concubines. If David was trying to attract the slave girls by being vulgar before them, he could have gotten any girl he wanted at any time. So it's a wonder why Michal was thinking that David was being malicious. Well, she's the one who had malicious thoughts of her husband. She didn't realize that David was doing service for the Lord. This suspicion of Michal really doesn't make sense, since David again could have wanted and have any girl that he desired. Most especially that Michal chose the wrong moment to raise this matter to David. She could have said this well after the celebration, in private before David, but she said this before everyone's view inside the house of David. She was disrespecting him in front of all the people in his house. She's trying to become the superior wife. But she disregarded him. She forgot that he was the king. She's not over him. And that she should be respecting the king. So Michal saw the maliciousness on David for dressing in that manner. What she forgot was Shaul when he was chasing David. 1 Samuel chapter 19, let's read verse 24. Shaul stripped off his garments, and he too prophesied in Samuel's presence. He lay naked all that day and all that night. He was prophesying and he was just ecstatic, sort of out of his mind. This was why the people say, is Shaul also among the prophets? Did she complain that her dad was so ecstatic that he prophesied naked all day and all night? Right? Now, Michal may or may not have known that incident. But remember this, Shaul was very spiritual at the time. He was not trying to get attention by showing his body to people. And he was before men. They were all worshiping the Lord. And this happened in Ramah, in the place of Samuel. David was wearing a linen robe because that was the proper way to worship the Lord, not as a highly exalted king. Michal's father was naked when he prophesied at Ramah, but she didn't understand either. Last few verses, verse 21, David said to Michal, it was before the Yahweh who chose me rather than your father. Don't forget that. God chose me, not your father anymore. Or anyone from his house when he appointed me as ruler over the Yahweh's people, Israel. I will celebrate before the Yahweh. I will become even more undignified than this. And I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slaves girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. What does David mean here? David reminded Michal that this was the Lord's handiwork, worship. She was not under the authority anymore of her father Shaul. She's acting like she's superior over David. And that's why David had to remind her, I'm the king, not your dad. So don't think just because your dad was the king that you can speak to me this way. David explained he did it before the Lord not to impress the slave girls. Imagine of all the people you'll impress, it's the slave girls. Slave girls, man, come on. This is impressive what David said in verse 22. I will become even more undignified than this. What was he saying here? He was willing to do worse. He was wearing a linen robe. Okay, I can go all the way. That's what he's saying. As long as I'm doing it for the Lord. But no one has the right to disrespect me when I'm worshiping the Lord. I can accept humiliation. I can humiliate myself before the Lord. But the slave girls you're talking about, they will maintain their respect and honor of me when they see me doing that. They should not think of it as an invitation to do religious sexual rites. That's what pagan religions do. They mix up sexual rituals with religion. You remember during the time of Paul, there were temple prostitutes. That's an old practice. It didn't start among the Greeks. It's been practiced in other ancient religions. They're practicing sexual immorality as part of the religion. And God despised that. Remember in Exodus chapter 32, verse 6. So the next day, the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterward, they sat down to eat and drink, and they got up to indulge revelry. Do you remember this Exodus 32? Moses was up in the mountain of the Lord. They got so impatient, so they said to Aharon, make us a god, and we will call it Yahweh. So they brought all their gold, and Aharon fashioned it into a golden calf. And what was their celebration? Revelry. That's actually sexual rituals. It's an abomination to the Lord. So David was not trying to do that. He was not inviting the slave girls to conduct sexual religious rituals with him. So the point here is that in the last part of verse 22, the slave girls should maintain their respect to David, whatever he was doing for the Lord. And Michal should also respect that. Last verse, verse 23. And Michal, daughter of Shaul, had no children to the day of her death. So that was Michal's fault. Having no children from David was a curse from the Lord for disrespecting the anointed one. So the Lord punished Michal and he defended David. So when we worship the Lord, we should give it all. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should also do what David did, wear a linen ephod and almost naked. We can do what we always do. Now, we dress appropriately, but the important thing here is that we enter the presence of the Lord. We give him all the due that is him, and that the Lord recognizes our worship, accepts our worship. Just as David gave his all to praise and worship the Lord for accepting him, we should give our all to honor the Lord. So even during the time of singing songs at the beginning of a service, we should not take that lightly. We should really worship the Lord and come to his presence, because God is waiting for you to worship him, because that will tell God if you're sincere about him or not. If you undermine the Lord, maybe he's not going to give you that favor that you've been asking him, because you're not respecting him as holy. So that's why our main lesson for today is put God first in your life. Seek the Lord in making decisions. David inquired of the Lord what to do with the Philistines. Treat the Lord as holy. So Uzzah failed to do that. He touched the Ark of the Covenant. Welcome the Lord to your home. Obed-Edom welcomed the Ark of the Lord in his house, and David to his city in the tent that he made. And lastly, letter D, worship the Lord with all you are, as David explained to Michal why he worshiped the Lord that way.